Welcome to the Splash 2024 Black Diamond Advisory YouTube podcast. My name is Cameron Lackbor, and I'm delighted to have with me our very special guest,
Jon Rambeau.
Jon.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So we have known each other for a long time. We were comparing notes before the recording of this, about who's the older person and who has gone to more conferences. It's sort of terrifying by the time you hit your mid-50s,
right?
Or gratifying. I don't know which. Could you give us a little background about your history in this space, because you are one of the eminence greases, right? So
sure.
Please.
So I started out as a corporate finance resource, and the irony of that is I was actually an engineer in school. And the reason I changed my major to business is that I hated computers, which at the time...
There is irony, right?
There is huge irony. And so the first job I have in corporate finance is to write programs to provide data to off of a mainframe to a department. This is old style. We're talking the 80s, mid-80s. A department of 100 people in this giant bullpen. That was corporate finance for a General Dynamics division in Fort Worth that built the F-16 aircraft. And... I had no idea what I was doing, but it was a necessary thing. Both I viewed it as an opportunity for me to develop skills that I knew were going to be useful, but more importantly, it was very satisfying, and I think a lot of us that have been in this industry a long time, to please users, end users, to give them some value. And so these automation routines that I ran provided a compression in their job. Instead of them paging through, if anyone's old enough to know what a green bar report is, instead of leafing through green bar reports, the data was delivered right to their computer, and then they could get to work. And
what language?
It was this stuff called RAMUS. I don't even know what RAMUS stands for. It was
I thought
an
it was going to
acronym.
be COBOL or RPG or something like that.
It was running on a TSO IBM mainframe, and so
Yes,
I had to do some really gnarly, detailed code to get the product just to run. But at that point, it was what they called a 4GL at the time, a fourth generation language. So it was approachable, even though I had no good skills to start with.
My first programming job was on an IBM mainframe.
Nice.
And JCL was the bash language.
Yep.
MVS TSO, I think, is what they call this.
That's correct.
System 360. So you've been in the space a long time. You've worked in a number of technology companies. I guess I knew you first. Were you Arbor or were you...
Early Arbor.
You were early Arbor. So you were there at the very beginning, 92, 93?
So I bought the product first. So that corporate job that I left General Dynamics for, I left to go to another company where they were doing a financial transformation. And at that time, it was coming off a mainframe, not surprisingly, into the client-server world.
I remember that.
And so I had a really good opportunity because they were trying to win what was called the Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award, which was well known in the past, but not so much these days.
I remember it.
But it was a way for a corporation to demonstrate to itself that it had gone through a rigorous procedural improvement. So we literally decomposed all the finance core business processes into charts and diagrams, and it was very, very metric based. It was really a great experience for a young man to kind of learn how to do that. And then they put me in charge of the team to go evaluate software. So I went out and evaluated products. I'll never forget, I got this DVD in the mail from Arbor Software, and it was version 2, which very few people have seen.
I was version 3.1.
Yeah.
That was my first release.
And you ran this little demo disc, and it showed you the magic of how their Excel interface worked, and I was like enthralled.
Yep.
So I dug into it, and then I asked them to come do a proof of concept with a guy named Mike Larimer, who I know you know.
I know Mike.
Mike
yes.
was the pre-sales resource who sold or helped work with me. John Schapp was the sales rep. Rest his soul. He was a good rep. And we went through that whole evaluation, built a very, very complex POC, and I was like, wow, this blows away what we're currently capable of doing. So it was an easy sell. And then they asked me to go to the board of directors and ask for funding with a business case, so that gave me the opportunity to build a business case. And I funded microcontrol and S-Base for $500,000 with server and some services and stuff, and we were off to the races. Well, I didn't know at the time I was customer 21 or whatever, and I was the 15th customer to implement the product. And so after that, they turned around and said, hey, do you want to join the company? You know how this mousetrap works. And I went, I don't know. I'm a corporate finance guy, right? You don't sit there and go, I'm going to go do pre-sales. How do I sell stuff? Had no construct. But my first daughter had been born, and I know this sounds cheesy, sorry, but my wife and I had always agreed that someone was going to stay home. And my wife was on a corporate executive track, and she was going to be a vice president someday. There's no question at General Electric, GE Capital. So she was on a rocket ship, and I was getting paid basic wages as a finance guy. And so we had to make a decision of who was going to stay home, and we openly discussed it. Dad raising the kids was okay. In retrospect, it was a great idea that we didn't do that, and that I took the offer to go to Arbor Software, who had doubled my income, and at that point, I never looked back.
Yeah. I got to meet Bob Earl in
Co-founder
Seattle in 2011. He told me that when they were writing S-Base, he smoked 5 packs of cigarettes a day. They called his office the cancer room.
Not surprised. Amazing. He's still alive.
Yes, it didn't kill him, apparently.
Yeah.
This was like 13 years ago, but still. Meeting one of my heroes, right?
Yes. Isn't it interesting his name is Bob?
Yes.
And kind of at OneStream, our Bob is the
There
Bob.
is actually a parallel, though, yes. Yeah. So you started in Arbor. Arbor Arbor acquired Hyperion, right?
So
but really, it wasn't that way at all.
It's a tricky story to actually parse. So first, we went public. We were a privately held company. We were growing at over 100% a year, and Arbor went public in '96. So that put us on the market. And what happened is, people aren't old enough to know, when there was the .com craze that kind of caught wind in the mid to late '90s, you had a lot of evaluations going on that were kind of well ahead of actual performance. Let's just say that. And so we had a good multiple, and the stock price was increasing pretty rapidly. So our market value easily exceeded Hyperion's. And so when Jim Parakis and Jim Dorian got together and had this conversation, Jim Dorian's real interest was never to be like a high-level Silicon Valley executive. He gave birth to something, and he had the humility to say, I'm only good for rocket stage 1. I'm not going to run this thing forever. Jim Parakis had a motivation to say, I need to cash out of where I'm at, and this is a good match for where I think these two companies could go. And he wasn't interested, apparently, in staying long at Hyperion. And so really, if whatever the transaction was, which was led by a Morgan Stanley investment banking group, was really a matter of the presumed combination was 1 + 1 was going to equal 3 when the two companies came together. But Arbor's valuation was so high that effectively it was an acquisition by Arbor of Hyperion.
Right.
To be humble to my Hyperion friends who were bothered by this notion of we took you over when we were a smaller fish and all that, I just kept saying it's a merger. We're here to build great solutions. And it was a really rough period after that. For the next 3 years, I lived through a lot of people leaving and people coming and changing dynamics, but it taught me a lot as an executive about how to do things right. And the good people prevailed ultimately.
I've heard OneStream described, I know a bunch of people within OneStream, and one of them, he was my last pure S-Base client in 1999. That's how long I've known him. That's how long I stopped doing like just S-Base applications or just S-Base implementations. He went to work for Hyperion after he was my client, and he says that OneStream is like Hyperion 2.0. He loved working for Hyperion. He went to Oracle when Oracle bought Hyperion. But he says it feels like Hyperion again. I guess there are a lot of the same players. Not entirely, of course, but a lot of people stay in this industry and they stick around.
That's true. The way I would characterize it is not unlike Dave Duffield, who founded PeopleSoft and then went on to found Workday. It's kind of like a second generation, and of course there's a cloud metaphor there too. But I always think that the thing about culture is it has to be led from the top. And the one thing that Bob, Tom, and Craig were absolutely dialed into, which I think you and I can really appreciate, maybe this gets edited out, but Oracle is a Darwinian culture, right? And unfortunately, it's not for everybody. It's produced some amazing things, and it's actually made it really hard for a lot of employees because it's a really rough place to work at times. But also, they never really had a customer success orientation, right? It was drive revenue, build pipelines, and all that type of stuff. So if Oracle had a core competency in my mind, it was always revenue and then legal. Those are kind of their two core competencies. Bob, Tom, and Craig understood something different, and that was if we can put our foot forward with honestly and sincerely trying to care about every customer that we bring on board, and that's kind of unheard of in enterprise software space. If you go compare it to SAP and all sorts of other vendors, I think that was a really good move, and it resonates well through the company. When you come on board, you culturally understand you're participating in a bigger thing than yourself, and you can call it mastery, and we struggle with it. I mean, nobody's perfect, right? Software is a really, really complicated business, and the fact that though you've grounded yourself in trying to be a participant in helping your customers succeed is a really good cultural backbone.
Yeah,
and
it drives everything.
Well. Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your current role at OneStream. What do you do, Jon?
So Jason Fitzgerald started a group called the Solution we now call it the Solution Network. We've had 3 names, so I'm not going to go into the history, but we probably have landed on a good name. Our team is an innovation engine in a way. It's not to suggest there isn't other innovation going on in our company, but sometimes you need to take a group and say, your job is to specifically aim at getting key solutions delivered. Because when you have a larger engineering organization, you have, let's just not call it technical debt, but you have technical assets that have to be maintained and improved in a more sustained kind of linear way. And you need a disruptive kind of group at times to say, let's take product and get it done better, faster, hopefully, and then it can evolve into that sustained business model. And so the first major project that I had was a CPM blueprint, which was, has now been dramatically improved in a really interesting way. And we hope that that's going to help not only our partners expand their footprint in a market that's really hard for us to compete in, but also accelerate our customer growth. But so that was a nice project. The second one was to take the Solution Network into the Solution Exchange and build out those 3 different areas, the open place, marketplace, and which was in place, and then the partner place, which you and other partners have benefited from. And that's a long-term strategy. That's going to take a while to play out. You and I could talk about this on or off the air, but it's difficult to build software. It's hard to build, in particular on OneStream in some ways, right? It's complicated. Yes. And by trying to facilitate having a third-party market to help grow our software-on-software model, it requires a lot of commitment. It requires a lot of teaming, a lot of partnering, and actually a lot of good fortune that partners are willing to make that investment. They're going to earn a return on their investment. You know what I mean? And that's a really exciting thing for me, because I felt like I was creating a baby that was going to produce more great babies. And so it was very encouraging. But I'm not a go-to-market guy. That's not really my capability. So after I got the rocket off the ground, let's say, we hired David as a tremendously experienced guy to take it to all the next levels. And so we'll see some great acceleration there. So then now I got to shift my focus back to product, which is really my passion, and that shouldn't surprise you. We both have a lot of product.
So before the recording, we were talking a little bit about one of your, I'm going to call it a hobby, but I don't know that hobby does it justice. It involves Green Berets and other elite groups. Please tell our audience what this is all about, because it's pretty cool.
So my dad was an HR executive, and so I've spent most of my career focused on a single motto, which says, I'm here to help other people succeed. And that sounds really cheesy, but I don't have an ego about me. I have an ego about helping others achieve what they can achieve. And my dad kind of planted that in my head early. So all of the jobs that I've had, and I've had 7 different careers.
Have you really?
Yeah, totally different careers, which is a little unusual. I've been in and out of this industry. I've had different roles in this industry. The other thing that I've thought was kind of humorous, because I don't know anyone else who's been in this, I've been a customer of this kind of technology. I've been a partner, a services implementation partner, which is the hardest leg by far. It is the hardest job in my mind. I've been in selling it via pre-sales with some of the largest transactions that Hyperion ever did, and I've been an engineering executive. So I got a 360-degree view of all that. But to be honest with you, my passion doesn't need to be in this space. So one thing I did when I was unemployed was I went and built a training program with a friend of mine who's Special Forces and knows Mark Geist, who's from 13 Hours Story and all that. Some really, really amazing human beings that the reason I got so attached to those guys was you and I think of consequences in things like the numbers were wrong. You know, someone missed a deadline. Maybe we had to work hard last week and finish our project or something. Those guys' decisions as young men are consequential to people's lives. And politics, of course, gets layered on top of that. But when you meet a lot of these guys, they're the most humble actors in the world. And yet they also have they're very team-oriented because they get trained that way, right, to be a very, very effective unit. So when I was unemployed, I said, what am I going to do? And I just started reaching out to my network. And when Chris Hoover, who was my teammate, called me back, he goes, this would be the greatest thing on earth. So we went and built a format for a program. Its sole purpose was to try to bond human beings, strangers to friends, to new executives, to startup company people, to whoever, as rapidly as possible. Because our theory was, regardless of what their endeavor was in life, there's an amazing amount of satisfaction that can come from not only the success of a team that really can hum, but just the human element of it, the love that you have and you can share with people when you're that tightly bound as human beings is a very special thing. And in my experience in life, very few people actually ever have that. So
the opportunity to do that.
The opportunity to have it. So our thought was, let's just spread the wealth and try to get as many of those as we could. So the story that I was telling you earlier, that Matt Malella, who's an Oracle executive, VP,
I know Matt as well.
been in the community a long time. His son works for us on our team. He's a very, very strong engineer and a brilliant young man. He's got a great career ahead of him. Has a brother who's kind of an out there kind of guy. So he had proposed sending him to our camp because he had just been vacated from his company that he founded with two of his best friends. They had thrown him out of the company, and he was kind of in a dump. So we brought him to the camp. He was an amazing guy because he was already an outdoorsman and knew how to hunt and do all these things that we did in the program. And he was about to board the bus when he left, and I said, so Mike, what are you going to do? And he goes, I don't know. I go, well, what'd you think of this week? I mean, the whole thing was to prepare you for the next thing. And he goes, this is the greatest week of my entire life. I go, that's a check on the program. Okay, thank you. But I said, what are you going to do to action this thing? Because that was the whole goal, is to get everybody on a trajectory. And he goes, I don't know. What do you suggest? I go, why don't you call the two most respected competitors you used to compete with, CEOs, and say, I'm in the market. I want a job. He did that the next week. He got 2 job offers.
There you go. There you go.
So that was a testament to how well the program executed on our minds. We had a whole lot of those types of experience, but COVID kind of killed it, and we couldn't bring people together and spend time in tents and in creeks and all that stuff together.
I want to attend.
Yeah.
Can I come to that?
But it was a great experience, just
amazing.
From the human element, right? Which is what we try to do every day, I think.
Excellent.
So.
That must have been quite an experience.
It was great.
Privilege to do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, it was a privilege to have you, Jon.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you so much for being a guest. It was fantastic catching up.
Likewise, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Great job.